Hey everybody, today is March 9th, 2012, and the Cube Computer MidTower Deluxe will be receiving a huge makeover today. It's going to be upgraded from the Phenom II quad-core 965 CPU to the AMD FX 8120 8-core processor. I'm also replacing the motherboard, I'm upgrading the graphics card, replacing the water block, that sort of stuff. So first, let's go and have a look at the water block here and new video card I got. This here is a Heat Killer 3.0 LC. The water block is currently in the MidTower Deluxe. In my opinion, is very sorry performing. It came from a Thermaltake Big Water 735 system, and all it has is a serpentine channel, is what they call it. It's just a back 4 channels through the block itself, and doesn't do a very good job of transferring heat from the metal to the coolant. But this block here is built much better. It does not have any acrylic on it, unlike the Thermaltake block, so I don't have to worry about the acrylic stuff cracking and leaking. This block here is completely metal and has a nice smooth copper base. And let's go ahead and take out the packaging so you can have a look at how it looks inside, which you'll definitely be impressed by how the inside of this block looks. I'm not going to tear it apart, but you can look inside through one of the inlets and see how the coolant on this block works. Going to get out this plastic. Okay, let's have a look here. I don't know if you can see or not, but get a good focus. You see those fins in there? Have a look at that, copper fins. This block uses fins to transfer the heat to the coolant, which is much better than the system that's in the current block in the MidTower Deluxe. And here's a closer look at the copper base. It probably might be able to use a little bit of lacquer, but right now it's smooth enough. I'm just going to go ahead and install it the way it is, because I mean it's good and smooth. And just another thing to know about this water block, the specifications here state, and on this website they were saying it was only compatible with like socket AM2 and AM2 Plus, and this side of documentation says compatible with AMD socket 754, 939, 940, AM2, and AM2 Plus. But you flip it over to the other side here, and here it says socket 754, 939, 940, AM2, AM2 Plus, AM3. Okay, here's a new graphics card. This is a AMD Radeon HD 6750, and of course I'm upgrading from a 3450, so that's a big jump. And the thing about me is I don't play games on the computer, but I do a lot of video editing and stuff, and I use stuff like Google Earth, which does help when you have a good graphics card. And the graphics card in the system right now is really old, and it has a hard time running 2 monitors really well. I mean, it runs them, but it only scores a 3.91 as experience index, and with one monitor it would score like a 4.0, which this card here will score a whole lot higher. Probably, I would say, maybe a 6.0 or something, if not higher. Or at least a high 5, I'm not sure. We'll find out when we get in the system. But this graphics card has a gig of RAM, and it requires a power supply connection, which I do have in the system. And on the back here it has DVI out, HDMI out, and DisplayPort out, which this DisplayPort, you can get adapters that convert it from like DisplayPort to DVI, or DisplayPort to VGA, or DisplayPort to HDMI, like that kind of stuff. And here's the fan on the cooler itself, and it mounts from the back side, the screws on the back side of it. And the good thing about this card is it seems like if I really wanted to, it wouldn't be that hard to install a VGA water block to it, because there's plenty of wide open space available to install one. Next we'll move on to unboxing the motherboard and CPU and stuff. Okay, here is the box from Newegg that has the motherboard, CPU, and also a display port to DVI adapter cable. Okay, here's the box from Newegg.com. It has the processor, motherboard, and a display port to DVI adapter cable. Here's the AMD 8-core FX processor, the 8120. And for those who've never bought one before, these come in tins rather than cardboard boxes. That's a definite plus. And here you can actually see the processor itself, the heat spreader. That's what it looks like right there. I'll set it to the side. The motherboard is down here, I think. Try not to make a big mess here. Okay, here's our display port to DVI adapter cable. I'm going to set that to the side. And now for the motherboard. Which the motherboard box is about the same size as the shipping box, so this is going to end up being a big mess if I can't get all these peanuts to stay in here. Let me see if I can try something. Pretty heavy box. It's a big motherboard box. It's a feature-rich motherboard, though. I'll give you that. Though I'm kind of disappointed that Newegg did not have the ASRock 890FX Deluxe 5 board in stock. They only had the Deluxe 4 in stock, which is really a socket AM3 board, but it is compatible with socket AM3 Plus with the BIOS update. The Deluxe 5 board has the UEFI BIOS, and unfortunately this one does not. It has the old-fashioned text BIOS. But it's still a really good board, though. And of course the box doesn't state nothing about AMD FX, but the board does support it. I went ahead and checked the CPU support list before I even purchased this motherboard, just to verify it. So let's see how we get this box open this second. That's not a challenge on its own. Usually open from the side, but this one here opens from, well, usually they open from like here, but this one here opens a little different. It's even got a carrying handle. Here's the user manual, pretty thick. Here's our driver disk. Then it tells you about instant boot, all these manuals and stuff. It's like a quick installation. What is this? This is all about the instant boot. Let's see. Intelligent energy saver. BIOS setup guide. And to be honest with you, back in 2008, when I was building a basic machine for a friend of mine, it was a Socket 784 build. I purchased an ASRock motherboard, and it was a pretty decent board. It's kind of unique in its own way. It has some very unique things about it. This one here is very unique too. Here's the IDE cable and floppy cable. Yes, this motherboard still has a floppy hookup on it. That's one of the reasons why I bought it too, because the MidTower Deluxe has a floppy drive in it. And although the floppy disk drive is such an antique device in computers, I still have a use for it every once in a while, so it's still good to have. Here's our I/O shield plate. We have SATA cables. We have all sorts of stuff here. This here, I believe, is for not real sure. Oh, it's USB 3.0. That's what that's for. And this motherboard has a header that hooks up to USB 3, so you have USB 3 ports at the front of the computer. Here's a little fan. This fan attaches to a heat pipe cooler that's on the MOSFETs and the Northbridge chip. Here is a front panel thing for USB 3.0. And this thing has its own special kind of hookup for USB 3. Which of course I believe that is the USB 3.0 style hookup. I may just stick those USB 3 ports in the back of the case because I don't have any extra 3.5-inch bays available to put that in. Anyways, here's the motherboard. Which of course if it was a native socket AM3 Plus board it would have a black socket, but this board here has a white socket because it's a socket AM3. But like I say, I'll repeat again, it does support the Bulldozer CPU with the BIOS update. And I do happen to have a socket AM3 processor available to do this update if it needs it. Anyways, have a look at this motherboard. Here is the active cooler I was telling you about. It has a big old heatsink located here. There's a heat pipe that travels from here and goes into here. And to install the fan, you unscrew these 4 screws, and this little 4 thing comes off, and you can stick your fan there. And this is thought out very well, because when you have a liquid cooling system, you don't have a CPU fan anywhere nearby to blow air across this, but the rear exhaust fan can pull some air across it. I mean, this is a real nice motherboard too. It has really good audio. It has the USB 3.0, the USB 2.0, gigabit LAN, FireWire, eSATA, digital audio out, optic out, I believe, and a clear CMOS button right here on the back of the board. So that way you don't have to tear open your system just to reset the BIOS if you're trying to overclock and the overclock fails. That's a very good thing about that. And this motherboard will cross-fire up to 3 cards. Now in this case I'm only using this one video card because I'm not seriously into gaming and stuff, but that's definitely a good thing to have just in case I do want to consider a crossfire stuff in the future. And of course here's the SATA adapter, which my optical drives use the ID interface. See, if I would upgrade to a 900 something series motherboard, I would have to replace my optical drives, and I wouldn't have a floppy disk drive anymore. And this motherboard, it has this little digital readout here. It has special codes, that way you can diagnose a problem if a problem occurs. You have your power button, reset button on board, so that way when you're just playing around with the motherboard outside the case, you'll have your buttons right there to use. This is a very nice motherboard, and not to mention it has 2 more SATA ports over here, and they're in a weird spot, but let me explain what these are for. All these ports over here, you can see, yep, all these ports over here are RAID, and these 2 ports here are either AHCI or nothing. They're just linked CI to E. So that way, when you're loading your RAID drivers, and when you first go into Windows installation, you don't have to load a driver first thing before you can even proceed with your RAID driver installation. Anyways, let's go ahead and have another look at this board. It's a close look here. It's really nice. And on this board, this is the way to see. Let me see how this heatsink mounts. The heatsink here has 2 screws that mount on the back side of the board rather than having the plastic pins. So it helps give it a more secure connection. I have to say, this is extremely nice how this is set up. Another odd thing about this board is how, if you can see or not, but notice the CMOS battery is back here. Normally they're like down here somewhere. So that's definitely different. And by observing this board, I can tell that it is, let me count the all these chokes. This motherboard has a 8+2 phase setup, which the motherboard in the MidTower Deluxe right now only has a 4+1. Not very good when you're trying to overclock a 125-watt CPU. Oh yeah, I almost forgot. Let's go ahead and have a look at this processor while we're at it. Here's what everything looks like inside. It talks about making sure your motherboard's BIOS is up to date, but the only thing is, if you're working with a new setup, that's going to be a little difficult, but in my case, my motherboard requires a BIOS update before I can use this, which I have to use my Phenom II 965 to update the BIOS. Here's the manual. Here's our processor and the case badge. And our heatsink fan. See what this one looks like. And I can say this one here is a little bit bigger than the one that comes with the Phenom II. It's slightly bigger. Has a slightly different fan. But of course, me, I'm using water cooling, which is going to be a whole lot better than this. But this ain't too bad for a stock cooler. So anyways, these are the new components for MidTower Deluxe, and I'm going to go ahead and get started with setting everything up. In the next video, you're going to see me clean out the MidTower Deluxe, which is extremely filthy. Normally, I don't let computers get extremely dirty, but this computer weighs a ton, and it's hard to get to. It has a lot of stuff connected to it, so I have kind of been lazied out, and I didn't keep it clean as much as I used to. Anyways, I'll be in the next video. So any questions or comments? Feel free to ask.